Coming up on the Tacoma podcast.
It's always been about how do I support our local creative minds and making sure they get paid what they're worth, because we're not in LA or like Atlanta or, somewhere that's very media production heavy,
Yes. Tacoma, what's good? Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Jarek Shockman. On the Tacoma podcast, we have dope conversations with the people of the city of Destiny. We have episodes with small biz owners, athletes, creators, performers, politicians, and neighbors. If you're down with Tacoma, tune in and let's get inspired. Let's go. All right, Davon, let's get it popping, man. Would you rather read a great book or listen to a great podcast?
Yeah, that's a great question. I know for me, I probably prefer a book over a podcast, just because, in terms of like personal growth and spending that time with yourself. Books allow you to disconnect, right? When you're listening to a podcast, you're still on some sort of device, real easy to get distracted and whatnot. So books just give you that intentional time to yourself, gives you a lot more space. I like physical books. And so just engaging with a physical copy and just kind of losing yourself in a book is nice. So I'll always choose that.
For sure, man. I was just going to ask you too, with books, do you listen to audiobooks? Because I definitely prefer a physical book as well.
Yeah. I mean, I personally don't listen to a whole lot of audiobooks, just because to me, it's like when I do make time to read, I am trying to disconnect. And that kind of goes hand in hand with what I do with my business, right? Because I'm always on, social media or always on some sort of device. And so, yeah, sometimes I just need to I got to draw the line somewhere, right?
For sure. Is there a good book you're reading right now?
So I kind of have been spending, I spent a lot of 2020 reading more like narratives, nonfiction and whatnot. Yeah. But for this year so far, I actually have this book. It's kind of like a portable MBA. So just to kind of learn a little bit about business administration and whatnot. And I've been chipping away at that. And then there's also a book called African Holistic Health, and just learning about how to, being more mindful of what I'm eating, what I'm consuming. Yep. And both of those are really big books, right? They're not just like books you can flip through and read in a week. I mean, you could if you locked in and got it done, but ultimately those are just books that I'm kind of just chipping away before I go to bed, and just taking a few moments just to learn something new every night. So.
Cool, man. Cool. Before we get too far along, I got to introduce you. We have Davon White. Davon, you want to let the people know a little bit about you?
Yeah. Blessed to be here. My name is Davon White, born and raised in Tacoma, Washington, CEO of Route 586 Consulting LLC. Yeah, man, just really, really glad to be here. Really here to just talk about my experiences and being able to hopefully just tap in with your community and just have some great dialogue.
Definitely, man. I really appreciate you jumping on. I've been following you on social media since we worked together, and we'll get into that maybe a little bit later, how we work together. But something I noticed on your Instagram in particular is just you're really big into like personal development, and developing your skills. Can you tell me a little bit why that's important to you? Because not everybody has this like road to personal development they work on every day.
Yeah, no, that is huge. And I would say for me, it's very critical, right? So I'm 24 years old right now, recently graduated from college, a couple years ago. And one thing I just realized with just traditional schooling is that there's certain things about your identity, right? And about who it is that you were not only meant to be, but who it is that, in that process of becoming, there's only so many resources and tools that you're going to get from school, right? And even in college, even if you're, doing something liberal arts related, right? If you're really spending a lot of time in classes that are focused on those topics, it's really the time that you're spending outside of those classes and using your free time to read books that catch your interest, right? And not on someone else's curriculum or on someone else's agenda, but, something powerful about being able to walk through a bookstore and grab something that catches your attention and then taking something from it that you need without anybody else's interference. And so that lack of being able to do that in formal schooling is really what kind of made me hungry for certain information. And now I'm just at a point where I'm just trying to feed that hunger, and get that information and learn about who it is that I am, especially just being young and Black in America, right? So
For sure. Yeah.
just got to get that cultural identity and just want to feel at peace with myself, honestly.
Definitely. I know you're, quite a few years younger than I am, right? I remember when I graduated college, though, I was like, man, I'm done with reading. I didn't pick up a book for years. Now I'm personally getting back into it myself because I see just the value of it, basically just reading. And, I try to personally read about 10 pages a day. And I do that just because, like, if I don't do at least 10, then I'll probably end up dropping the habit. So, speaking of habits, do you have like a morning routine or like, what do you do? Like, what's your personal development routine look like? Do you do it daily?
Yeah, in terms of reading, my ideal, and no one's perfect. I would say my ideal routine when I'm able to really like stick to it, when after you have a long day, and say if you have a job, like I have another job outside of my business, so like being able to spend all day, taking care of this, going to my business, catching up with people. I have found, and even in some of the books that I recently read, just that affirmation that reading before you go to bed is very impactful, because it's like you fall asleep with that stuff on your mind. And what you do right before you go to bed is critical. It impacts how you sleep. It impacts what you dream about. And ultimately that spills into the next day. And so being able to just not only read, but also meditate before bed, even if it's, just 15 minutes, I usually try to shoot for 30 if I can. But like you said, sometimes if I don't just set that bare minimum, I'm going to miss the target completely. So meditation and really reading before bed is kind of like my cornerstones.
That's dope, man. I definitely need to pick that up because I start in the mornings personally, just because it's just the way I like to start my day. But it's funny because the journal I have, it talks about nighttime journaling, and I've been doing it about 4 days a week, but I just like, something happens, I get busy, or like I just like get tired and I go to bed. But like I agree. I think it's super important to kind of end the day with some reflection and maybe some reading. So do you journal yourself?
Yeah. No, I've always been a writer.
Okay.
It's always been a big part of just how I've processed and being able to just understand some of the things that I have been through in this life, So writing, I keep a lot of journals. In the sense of like, once I fill them up, I hold on to them, and being able to reflect on them years at a time has given me a lot of clarity. And I think especially in this age of like information that we're in and how like fast paced things are, it's very critical for us to go back maybe a couple weeks and just be like, how was I feeling around this time? And so that affirmation that you need in terms of knowing that you're making progress, you don't need it from social media. You can get it from your own memories and your own experiences. So, yeah. I'm most definitely right. I don't know where I would be if I didn't.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's cool that you take the time to do this, especially juggling a business and a full-time job and whatnot. And it's always great to work on yourself, because you need yourself to do the things you want to accomplish and impact the people you want to impact. Speaking of impacting, I've been looking at your business, Route 586, and what you guys do. Can you tell the people a little bit what you guys do?
Yeah. So in a nutshell, Route 586 Consulting LLC, what we do is we provide very specific, genuine, detailed marketing services to our clients that we work with, right? So we're locally based here in Tacoma, Washington. And a big part of what we do is focus on bringing the story of your business out through your marketing. And of course, we have our own strategies of doing that. But the biggest focus is on let me backtrack. companies are trying to figure out where to start their branding and their marketing, they often get lost in needing to like do what everybody else is doing, or they want to see those numbers. They want to see their followers like shoot straight up. And it really, we require our clients to just dial back a little bit and just be like, okay, well, what is your story? Let's get centralized first, and then let's create elements around that. Because I can have somebody, one of my partners create you a logo without knowing much about what you do. But having those intimate conversations just takes it to a whole nother level. And especially with our local businesses here, Tacoma businesses have a special identity. There's something real special about being in Tacoma, and you want to have that embedded in your branding and in your marketing as well. So I guess I would say a big focus is on small business too. So.
Okay. What inspired you to start this business?
Yeah, in terms of starting Route 586, it came from a place of wanting to have a deeper impact on how folks are aware of the messages that they're leaving on their clients, right? And so I got my degree in communication, nothing business related. And I think when you're studying more from a science of business kind of perspective, it's very almost like robotic, right? But what I'm bringing to the table through Route 586 is this experience and this knowledge of knowing that cultural representation should come first. And historically, what we've seen in media and marketing is that cultural representation is like almost like a last priority for a lot of people. Now we're starting to see a little bit more. But at the time, when I was forming this idea, is that when businesses are reaching out into communities, especially our local communities, they should be able to tell their story in a wholesome way that it not only empowers the business, but should be empowering and making sure they're being intentional about the messages that they're leaving with their clients, right? So, I don't want to go as far as deep and say it's applying this real anti-racist lens, but that's what really charges me in this realm of like media and representation, is deconstructing past images that have like impacted how people perceive me or impacted the perception of like, the people that I love. So all of that is a change that can come through media and marketing. And it starts really small. So thank you for asking, because I often don't get to talk about that.
Can you get into how you would change that messaging?
Yeah, it's about, again, identifying what are your intentions, right? And I think we're in this era where people are really focusing on intent versus impact, right? Because people will say, oh, well, I didn't mean that, my intent was this. Well, to prevent that whole conversation, let's really dial back, go back to what your intentions are, and let's be strategic about what your messaging is and how that speaks always to your intentions. And that way there's no room for the impact to not be parallel with that, right? And so, yeah, it starts being very, very grounded, like at home is what I like to say, with who you are and what it is you're trying to get across. Even if you're just selling something, a small product, if you're selling ice cream or you're, something really specific that you think that this stuff doesn't matter, but it does. And it'll prevent a lot of chaos down the road. So, yeah.
For sure, man, for sure. So, like, speaking of just like getting going and things like that, and like working with companies and helping them with their messaging, what's one of the biggest hurdles that maybe your business has had and or you've seen businesses have?
I would say the biggest hurdle is getting people to really just slow down, right? We're in a very fast pace, no matter what market you're in these days, it's very fast paced. And when you're starting a business, especially for our business owners now, it's like there's a demand to like, okay, I need to generate some revenue. I need to be making some money. I need my return on investment. And, I need to feel that affirmation that what I'm doing is worthwhile. And the biggest thing is just slowing down and making sure that you have everything in order before you really hit the ground running. And then on top of that, a lot of the clients that I work with, or the people that I've been blessed to work with up until this point, are really creative thinkers. And you know, when you're working with someone with a very creative mind, they generally have a bunch of different ideas, right? And I'm like that too, where you're trying to keep everything organized, but because you have all these great ideas, it's very difficult to navigate them on your own. And so sometimes a lot of the work that I'm doing is not helping people come up with ideas, but it's like, how do we take your ideas and make sure that they go as far as they can by just keeping things organized? So there's a wide spectrum of struggles. It just depends on what kind of people I'm working with. But yeah.
Definitely. Just you mentioned creatives having a ton of ideas, and I actually struggle with this myself because I feel like I spread myself too thin because of these ideas where, it's better sometimes to just focus on, one or two things. But that's another topic for another day. What about, you hear the buzzword being authentic in your branding, in your messaging. I'm not a huge fan of that word authentic, but I do think, and I say that just because I think it's more of a buzzword at this point, but I think you need to be true to who you are and as a brand, as a person. Can you describe maybe a little bit like what you feel about that, like how important that is to you in your branding, or like when you're communicating that to your clients?
Yeah. In terms of just being true to you and to your business, right? I think, especially in this world that we're living in where it's like everyone thinks that they're being authentic, I think it's very important for us to understand that your story is something that only you have been through. The idea that sparked your business idea or sparked the foundation of your business is something that like came from something deeper within you, right? Whether or not you see it, you might have just been joking around with a couple of buddies and been like, yo, let's start X, Y, and Z business, but ultimately there's an alignment of your experiences that led you to that point. And no matter how minute those details are, it's very, very unique. It's a very unique story that needs to be told. And in this realm of everybody starting businesses, especially right now, like it's easier than ever and the need is higher than ever. You have to focus in on the things that are unique to you. Otherwise, your competitors are going to outsell you because that's what they're doing. That's what really is leading people to success, is that factor of storytelling and just being genuine. I like the word genuine better than authentic, right?
When did you start Route 586?
Yeah, so it's taken a couple different forms, but I like to backtrack the beginning of Route 586 to 2016 as a brand, right? I was very, at that time I was in Seattle, up at the University of Washington, very much in tuned. Yeah, right. Very much in tuned with my creativity. So I was involved with, the local music scene and trying to be a part of bringing that community stronger together. And so when I started Route 586, at that time I didn't have a car. And I think this is important because to get from the east side of Tacoma, where my family was at, to the University of Washington, I would take the Route 586.
Dude, yeah.
Yeah, and that's where that name comes from. And as that route, is being reduced a lot since, I was in school, I want to make sure that's always a part of my story, because that journey of traveling back and forth to Tacoma is a big part of my story. And I can talk on and on about that. But ultimately, Route 586 started off as like a music blog that was meant to bring the local, Tacoma and Seattle community together, the same way that, I was bringing my experiences and my story of becoming was being bridged through, that I-5 corridor, right? And so that's how it started. I realized how difficult it was for me to really implement all the ideas that I had by myself, in addition to like balancing school and then making sure I'm doing the things that keep me at peace, right? And so I then instead of doing a broader music blog, it turned into more of like a focus. Let me just focus on managing a couple of my friends and just helping them with their marketing. And again, through that, just wasn't necessarily where my heart was at. And so again, had to backtrack. And for all my entrepreneurs out there, you will do this, right? You'll go through this process of just trying something smaller, and then, it's a cycle. It's most definitely a cycle. But after that second iteration of going through that journey of figuring out what it is I was meant to do with this business, I really locked in on marketing and media. And those are the skills that I picked up from the first two experiences. And that's what I'm running with, because I feel like on a professional level, it can take me a lot further. There is some money behind it, right? I'm not just, doing stuff in the community for free, but the money that I do make, I can make sure I'm intentional about impacting local artists still. So that's where that foundation comes from. From the jump, it's always been about, how do I support our local creative minds and making sure they get paid what they're worth, because we're not in LA or like Atlanta or, somewhere that's very, media production heavy,
Yes.
in Tacoma,
Yeah.
our artists are often very undermined. And so I'm just trying to do what I can to counteract that.
For sure. Kind of a random question for you. We've obviously been dealing with COVID and, shutdowns and lockdowns. How has that impacted local artists? Do you know? Just because I know that a lot of them do like live shows and whatnot, and I can't imagine that that's not hurt them. Do you have any insight on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to speak like an expert, but I will say that a couple of historic music venues, especially like in Seattle, have been impacted significantly through COVID. A couple have had to shut down. In Tacoma, I would say a lot. I mean, in our area in the Pacific Northwest, a lot of our local artists really live off of being able to perform, being able to sell merch, being able to tour and do the things that require human interaction. And so I would imagine that a lot of them have been heavily impacted. But again, when you have that creative mind, you find ways to get around that. So, there have been, visual shows like online. We're maximizing our resources. And if you really love what you do, then, you're taking advantage. So I'm not going to say our artists are struggling, but again, it has been an impact, I would say.
Yeah, definitely, man. Thank you for answering that. I was super curious about that because I know like one of my favorite places in Tacoma is Alma Mater, and they do live shows and whatnot, and they've obviously not been able to do that this year, which is impacting them, but also artists and our creatives. Speaking of your business again, what's one of your biggest accomplishments you think since starting in 2016?
My biggest accomplishment has been, my biggest, like for Route 586, my biggest accomplishment has been one. I mean, I guess it's a two-ended answer, right? I would say on one end, it's converting the business into an LLC, right? As I've gotten older and just learn about business structures and the benefits of having an LLC versus a sole proprietorship versus just doing something out of the love of your heart, right? There's a lot of benefits financially, along with legitimacy that comes with it. That's worth paying attention to. And so through that learning of building a business, again, I didn't go to school for none of this, so it's all been self-taught. I've just learned along the way that one, you can start an LLC without having someone holding your hand. All the information and the tools are out there. And I empowered myself to take advantage of them and formed my LLC on my own with very, very, very little assistance. So that's something I'm proud of in terms of the business. And then two, like I said, that journey of like figuring out, okay, I have my brand, I have my story, but like, what is my business? Being able to say that I feel like I'm towards the end of that cycle. Hopefully there's not a big change again, but I feel really, really good about what it is I'm meant to do with this business. And I think for any entrepreneur, being able to have that peace of mind and that confidence means a lot. It means a lot to you. So
For sure.
Yeah.
You don't need to share your vision by any means, but what are you most excited for moving forward with your business, you think?
What I'm most excited about moving forward is that my vision, the way it's lining up, is I will be able to create opportunities and jobs for local creatives, whether or not you have a formal education, right? Whether you have a degree in, design or whatever. There's a lot of people in Tacoma, especially a lot of young people who know how to navigate certain programs, certain applications, and turn their ideas that are behind their eyes, right, and in their mind into something really great. And that our local businesses could benefit from. So I'm just looking to be a part of that process of adding more legitimacy to this realm of work that is creative expression. There are a lot of people already doing that, so I'm not saying I'm leading the way, not by any means, but I'm most excited about being able to be in a position to further that mission and to empower our young people here in Tacoma to realize that there's real money behind doing what you love more than anything.
Hell yeah, man. I agree 100%. I love that. Mm-hmm. You just mentioned briefly about like formal education and whatnot, and you've been graduated for a few years now, right? A couple of years?
Yeah, since 2018.
Yeah, okay. Yep. 2018 from UW. Curious, do you do any continuing education, like, or, whether that's like online learning or like anything? Do you continue to learn?
Yeah, I mean, outside of like any kind of like courses or anything, not really. There are, I remember people saying like YouTube University and making jokes around that. Yeah. And when I was a little younger, I'm like, okay, you can't really learn everything on YouTube. You need to get some kind of formal teaching. But if you know what questions you're asking, if you know what you're looking for, then yeah, YouTube can be like a university course. You might as well can go to Harvard. I think going to school or even, high school and college, whatever level, 2 years as well, that continued education teaches you how to ask questions, right? More than anything else. And so if you can take those skills and learn, okay, what questions am I really asking? What answers am I looking for specifically? Then you can maximize not only your time, but your time more than anything, right? Instead of sitting through a class and maybe, at a 10-week schedule, there was only 1 or 2 weeks where you felt really inspired. And the rest of it was like, okay, I don't know why I'm here. So all that to say, like, I spend like the time that I spend with my books or the time that I spend exploring things on YouTube instead of like, I don't really watch a whole lot of TV. Those are the things that keep me on this journey of learning and just expanding my knowledge.
Yep, for sure, man. YouTube, I asked you that hoping you would mention YouTube because YouTube is huge. And personally, that's where I learned a lot about like starting a podcast, even like, what do I need to do? The steps. I went to YouTube. I didn't go anywhere else for that. There's a couple hosts. I don't know their personal names, but they're called, Earn Your Leisure, I think it is.
Yeah.
I just started listening. My buddy Kelvin got me on them. I'm like, dude, this is what's up. Like tricks you wouldn't even know of. Like, it's just crazy to me, right? So, like, it's nuts. So I know you are big on building generational wealth. Can you speak on why that's important to you?
Generational wealth is important. Well, let me backtrack because I think Earn Your Leisure is a great resource that I'm just glad to hear other people talk about it because, again, due to COVID, we're all like in our little silos. So the fact that their Earn Your Leisure's reach is what it is at this point, in less than a year, right? They haven't even been around that long. It's crazy. So I would really highly recommend that. That is, if I am listening to some kind of podcast or something like that, it is Earn Your Leisure. So shout out to them.
We'll drop them in the show notes. Yeah.
Right. And then in terms of generational wealth, why that's really important to me is because both of my parents have sacrificed a lot to raise their children. And due to, historical oppressive systems, their ability to build generational wealth, at least during the time where I was born, was a little bit, there was a glass ceiling there. In terms of the resources that were available, in terms of the hurdles that they had to get across, and just the times that, being just the times, let's say that.
I'll be honest, man. I mean, like in regards to real estate, a lot of systems that were in place that would hurt them in regards to purchasing property, for example.
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah. And I mean, it goes deep, right? But what I will say is that I feel like it's important for me to take advantage of the resources that are here that maybe they didn't have, or maybe my grandparents or my great grandma didn't have, right? My cousins and everybody around me who was limited to certain things because of just, again, those historical, oppressive, racist systems that have limited our access to information more than anything. So it's important for me because, like, I'm still very young. I have a younger sister, and like I want to see her win as well. But I want my kids and my grandkids and great grandkids that hopefully I'll be able to meet one day. I want them to really, really understand that during this time, this age of information that they're saying that we're in, that I took advantage of that more than anything. I feel like it's a responsibility to build generational wealth right now. There's really no reason not to. And that's included in considering all of the oppressive systems that are still in place today. There is far more resources to navigate and to find a way out, right? So yeah, that's a whole conversation by itself. Definitely. But I just feel like it's possible. I understand that it's possible in a way that people before me might have been challenged to understand. Like, they had a lot more other things going on. So, yeah, I just want to see my family win and bring them together. So that's where the generational wealth comes in.
Cool, man. It's just inspiring to see, man, from such a young man. I should say young. I was going to call you a young individual, but a young man. So yeah, you took a huge step this year on buying a property. Can you just talk briefly about that a little bit and like your experience with that? Because it's everybody knows that's listening probably in Tacoma. It's a tough ass market.
Yeah. Well, it wouldn't be possible without my agent. So shout out to you, right? Let me start by saying that with this understanding in mind in terms of like needing to build generational wealth, but also like being here in Tacoma and seeing how the world is valuing Tacoma, it's like, okay, I need a piece of this. And if the world is having their eyes on here, like Tacoma's not a place, it's pretty accessible, right? So, investors can get in and out like easily, bigger pockets, like global resources and networks and communities are talking about Tacoma in a way that's like almost like kind of scary if you're like from here and you don't want Tacoma to change. Like, not like we want to stay in the, the old times, but if you want Tacoma to stay the place that it really is, you have to understand that that's going to be really hard unless if people are owning their property, because the flexibility for people to just come in from the outside, there's a lot of flexibility. So buying a house buying the condo that I'm in has been great. The process was a little bumpy. I was aiming for like a multifamily first, but then just understanding more about the market and the demand and seeing how difficult, bidding wars and all of that, like where I was at the time, there was no way, I was not ready for that. And so through this process of just like, okay, can't do a multifamily, let me downscale to maybe like a home, right? Not really a whole lot of room in my annual income for that. So let's start even smaller, right? And that's how I've locked in with the condo. And it's just been good because I know that this is something that's, it hasn't been a year yet, but I know that there's already equity there. I'm pretty sure we got it out of steel, right? So to this is part of a bigger plan, right? Because I still would like to have a multifamily. But you have to understand that, especially if you're young or if you're coming from, a lower income background, such as myself, you have to be willing to start small, because the way that the market is growing and like continuing to grow, because there's such a low volume compared to how many people are trying to live here, the market's going to keep going up. In my opinion, I'm not an expert, but context clues.
Yeah.
So yeah, man.
For sure, man. Yeah, no, I mean, with the inventory being so low, it's really hard to just get into a property. But I think just being okay with getting into a condo, I call it the real estate ladder. Basically, that's the first step, right? You got to get in the game, and there's only one way to do it, and that's to buy your first property. And so I've been preaching this for a couple of years with people that are my friends that have just waited, and I'm like, look, what has happened over these couple of years, And so that's why it's super important for me to just inform people of that, because I know what real estate can do for people in regards to wealth. And Tacoma is a great place to definitely buy. But something that I talked to Dave Jones, and I know Dave as well. Dave linked us up together. It's to me, it's finding ways to get people that do own property to hold on to these homes, because what I'm seeing a lot of now is people selling because the prices are so high. But then you got to find another place to live. And if we're talking about generational wealth, for example, you want to hold that property. And so I'm hoping that there's programs that can help people hold on to those properties, keep them in good shape, because we do have a lot of older homes to really help that wealth building, because I would love to see the wealth stay in Tacoma.
Yeah, I agree. And you hit the nail right on the head in terms of like our older, like a lot of our homes and a lot of our buildings, apartment buildings are really dated. But because of the demand of the market, like those properties are still worth crazy amounts of money. Simply because like people want to live here, like it's so desirable. And so if you're an investor, you don't even really need to flip the property. You just hold it for a little bit. And if your goal is to really be here, and if you want to have a family here and like raise your family here, or your family has already been here, then your goal should most definitely be just grabbing a piece of property and holding it as long as you can. Yeah. I most definitely agree with you 100%.
Buy and don't sell. Hold it. Yep, for sure. Hey, I got a random question for you. I know you don't watch a lot of TV. Have you seen the Undercover Billionaire that has Monique Inlet Mosley in it, and she came to Tacoma to start a business with $100?
There's been a lot of chatter about that lately. I haven't seen that show or that series yet, but I have been hearing about that, and I think that idea it's going to be exciting to see that full series come out to play. And I think it'll teach a lot of people about like how valuable and how much attention is on Tacoma right now, right? To where like undercover wealthy people are using us as a state, not using us, right? But they're staging something here to show us an example of what's really possible.
Yeah.
So
yeah, Leanne, my wife, and I have watched the first couple episodes. I mean, mainly just because Tacoma's in it, but it's pretty dope to see. And you get a very legit picture of what Tacoma's all about, too, in the first couple of episodes, which is really, really cool. So I know, you started your business. Do you think you're going to start more businesses in the future? I can't imagine you not, but I got to ask you.
Yeah, I would say the idea is to just constantly apply what I'm learning. And as I learn more, I'm sure, and again, as I feed my creativity as well, I'm sure ideas for businesses will come. I've had ideas about, maybe starting a bookstore one day, because I really love to read. So just thinking about things that speak directly to me. And again, not chasing the money. If money wasn't a factor and I could just be happy. What are the things that I would love to do? So, and just including my work with young people as well. Like I would love to be able to have some sort of business or entity that allows me to just continue working with the generations that are coming after me. Cause they're coming quick. I'm not slowing down in age. So, I just want to be able to keep opening doors. And yeah, so I'm sure there will be more to come.
I know that you you have a full-time job, you have a business. Is there any pointers that you can give to somebody that has a full-time job, maybe thinking of starting a side hustle or a side business or a full-time business, on how you like manage time or how you go about doing that? Because it can be overwhelming, I'm sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's just about understanding how much is your peace of mind worth, right? And so as you go through those difficult moments of trying to you're literally exhausted, right? Because you're doing so many things, you're juggling so many projects. Like you'll have moments of oh man, I wish I could just take a break. And sometimes you can afford to take a break, but you have to understand that a lot of those key moments where you're at that verge of I'm really tapped out, that's where you're most hungry, and you have to find ways to feed yourself to be able to maximize those moments where you're most hungry, where you're most creative, when you really, really need to remind yourself, this is why I'm doing this, is for whatever your reason is. And if your reason is not deep enough to keep you going through those moments, then again, like I've said, sometimes you need to just take a step back and really just understand what the bigger picture is. So, and just give yourself grace. That's something I say a lot, because you often are beating yourself up along the way if you miss the target, or things don't always go as planned the first time around, if you're just kind of putting your foot in the water. So just give yourself grace, because by you pursuing something, by building a business, that's amazing. And you're not supposed to be perfect the first time around. And that's an amazing accomplishment in itself. So just be gracious toward yourself, love on yourself, right? And just keep your cup full.
Cool, man. I love that advice. That's it, man. Do you have anything that you want to share that I might have missed?
Yeah, I would just say that I would encourage you all to follow Route 586 Consulting on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, just at Route 586. And our website is route586.com, very consistent. And we're currently running a special on website. So if you need a new website, whether now or down the road, or any marketing assets down the road, I would love to help you tell your story. So
cool, man.
Yeah, and just glad to be here. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem, Davon. I really appreciate it, man. And I'm sure I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, no doubt, man. Thank you. All
right.
Have a good day.
All right, guys, that's a wrap. Thank you for joining and taking the time to listen to the Tacoma podcast. If you were down with this episode, I'd be super pumped if you subscribe. Also, if inclined, please drop a review and share the pod with a friend. I'll catch you on the next one. Thanks again. Peace.